shameless promotion for the upcoming MCU film, Like Lightning! Get it? Because the tagline for Thunderbolts is Justice Like Lightning? That's why my joke is funny. Yeah, that's a good joke. Good job, buddy. So this is issue 1 of Thunderbolts by Jackson Lanzing and Collin Kelly. And if you don't know who the Thunderbolts are, they started off as a team of villains pretending to be heroes, and then it became a team of villains pretending to be reformed heroes, and then it was a team of villains actually being reformed heroes, and then it was just a bunch of anti-heroes like Venom and Elektra and the Punisher and Ghost Rider and whatnot. But this latest incarnation of the Thunderbolts is quite clearly just build-up for the movie that's going to come out in 2025. And that team is going to have Bucky Barnes, the Red Guardian and the White Widow, the new Hawkeye, Kate Bishop, Ghost from Ant-Man, Taskmaster from the Black Widow movie, and I think it's still supposed to have Harrison Ford as Thunderbolt Ross, but I'm not keeping my hopes up. So in this book, we get to see Bucky Barnes leading his new Thunderbolts, which includes Sharon Carter as the new Destroyer, even though I don't think she's going to be in the movie, Contessa de la Fontaine, who you might recognize from all those end credit scenes. She's like the new Nick Fury who shows up and recruits people, and the Red Guardian, who is now very much like his movie personality, not really like his old comics personality. And we get this lovely Terry Dodson and Rachel Dodson cover. We haven't seen one of these in a while. That's pretty fresh. I've always liked the Dodson's art. It's very clean and evocative. I haven't read much by Jackson Lanzing and Collin Kelly. I know they recently did a lot of Captain America, and I bought the first couple issues of that, but wasn't super interested in where it was going, and I didn't love the narrative in general, so I didn't read it. And because of that, I'm missing a lot of background context. So I'm coming into this series pretty much as fresh as somebody who doesn't know anything about the Thunderbolts would. And there's a lot of classic stuff happening in this issue. We have characters we've known for a long time, fighting Nazis and then fighting the Red Skull, and it all feels very classic, but still new. And in general, the character work is pretty solid, and the dialogue is pretty solid. There's nothing really distracting me from the overall story. I can successfully become immersed. One of my favorite moments of dialogue is in the intro section when Bucky Barnes says, "Nah, this isn't revenge, this is justice. Like lightning." And then you get the cool double-page spread with all the credits and the title sequence, and that's a very convincing moment. It's really satisfying for the old-school comic nerd. The overall premise makes sense. They just want to kill the Red Skull, and frankly, it's kind of about time. So the book has a really clear direction that it's going in. It's really easy to follow along. And we get this really cool scene where the Red Guardian finally shows up to the fight, and they've got him in shadow, so you think, oh, is that Captain America? We didn't think he was going to be involved in this. But then it's actually Red Guardian, and it's super cool. It's a really great moment in the comic. It's very dramatic. But it's not like this comic is perfect. In general, it's too wordy. These characters that are all supposed to be like super spies and the heroes that the villains are supposed to be afraid of spend way too much time talking to each other. Aren't super spies supposed to be like stealthy and just shut up and get the job done and give away as little information as they can? I don't know, the more you talk, the less scary you are, and I wish these characters were a little bit more scary. I do like that we have this big fight with the Red Skull, and the Red Skull has his giant weapons that he's using, and he's spewing all the hate he normally spews, and it feels like a classic Captain America comic from the late 60s, early 70s that I grew up reading. But it also feels like we're getting the climax a little too soon. Like, the Red Skull is not the villain that you show up and beat up as if it's no big deal in the first issue of a series. He's a big deal. You gotta work your way up to him. And of course, it's obvious that we're not done with the Red Skull. He's clearly gonna come back in some way in this series. We know we're setting up for that, and the characters know that they're pretty much setting up for that. But if all they needed to accomplish in this first issue was killing him and then setting up the fact that he's going to come back to life later, then maybe we didn't need such a giant climactic scene. And as far as the Red Skull's hatred spewing went, it was definitely on brand for the Red Skull. He was saying pretty much the same ideas that he's always had, but in a certain way it kind of made less sense. Like, the extent of his argument in this issue is, hatred always wins, you know it, but he doesn't actually say what he wants. Usually, he's acknowledging that hatred wins and he's on the side of hatred, but he has something he wants. He has a tangible goal in mind. But in this issue, it kind of just felt like they were stopping him because he's a bad dude, and that's it. Like, he didn't do anything specifically to make them want to stop him, they just don't want him being around. So overall, it just didn't feel as dramatic as it could. And there were a bunch of times throughout this issue when dramatic moments weren't as dramatic as they could have been because of either the way they were drawn, or maybe the script writing. One moment in particular that really bothered me was when they were walking away from this giant explosion they caused, and it's super scary looking, and you're thinking, oh man, I don't want to piss off these anti-heroes, they're scary. Except you've got Red Guardian over here doing a Dungeons and Dragons style huzzah! And that kind of just ruins it. And the art in this issue from Geraldo Borges? Borges is alright. It's pretty good. It's definitely not my style. It's not as detailed as I normally like it, and it's kind of scratchy looking, a little bit sketchy looking, but it's also not stylized enough to be just a style that I don't like. Like, the art in this issue looks like one step down from Leonard Kirk art. And Leonard Kirk is good, but also just not my style. And I think there are plenty of moments throughout this comic where the art did not properly convey the drama of the situation, and the story suffered for it a little bit. But overall, it's not bad. And there's a layout issue that bugged me about halfway through, where we end the page with Red Guardian in this panel here punching a dude in the face. Totally normal way to end a page. But then the very next panel we see on the next page is him in that exact same pose with his arm about to punch, maybe, and there's more guys behind him. And that just doesn't make sense sequentially. If you want to use the same exact pose in multiple panels in a row, then usually you show before the action first and then after the action second. So ideally, there would have been guys running up behind him in this panel at the end of the page, and then he'd be smacking them silly at the beginning of this page, instead of us getting two brand new guys who are also sneaking up on him. But even then, if you want to duplicate the panel 2 times in a row, then you really shouldn't spread it out between 2 different pages. It should be those 2 panels directly in a row, so that you can very clearly see the difference between the 2 panels, and there's emphasis on the action taking place between the 2. And if the point wasn't to emphasize the action, then you shouldn't have duplicated the panel. You should have just drawn him doing something different. Anyway, as a whole, this issue has a lot of classic elements to it, but it also feels fresh and new, and it's getting us geared up for something new in the MCU. The writing is okay, the art is okay, the premise is okay. It's not the most exciting thing in the world, and I'm not breaking down the door of my local comic store so I can buy issue 2, but it's alright. If you want to see these characters, this is a place to see them. So I'm giving issue 1 of Thunderbolts a 6 out of 10. I feel like that's pretty fair. I don't want to go any lower because the script is pretty good compared to some other stuff I'm reading lately, but I also don't want to go any higher because then it kind of diminishes the value of those higher numbers. So I say 6 out of 10. Did you read it? What do you think? Today's question comes from Just a Dog. Alright, and they want to know, who is the coolest comic creator that you have met? Ooh, good question. Because I've stood 2 feet away from Stan Lee while he signed my comic, but I don't think that really counts as meeting him. I guess the coolest, as in most exciting comic creator for me to meet personally was probably David Finch, just because I really love his work and I've always loved his work. And he was a really chill guy too, really easy to talk to. But I've noticed that to be the case with just about any comic creator. I've barely met any comic creators who aren't just really chill people who don't mind chatting with you at a convention for a while. So to answer your question, they're all cool.